Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Stoa. Today, we're having a session on Beyond Coaching with Peter Limberg and Joel Monk. To get started, why don't you guys put one word in the chat to just describe your state, how you're coming into this session today. And I'm Alia. Hello. Many of you don't know me, but I've been a member of the Stoa for a while and also a fellow coach, and really excited about this conversation. So those of you who are not new to the Stoa, you know that we're recording this session. So we'll be recording the beginning, and then later on we will have some time to chat off the record. But yes, this session is called Beyond Coaching. The session is going to be presented by Joel Monk and Peter Limberg. So Joel is the founder of Coaches Rising. It's like an online hub that supports coaches all over the world. They have a wonderful podcast as well. I'm sure you guys have heard of it. So Peter will also be joining Joel for a presentation. You guys all know Peter. He's the steward of the Stoa. And so for the format of the session, we're going to have presentations by Peter and then Joel. And then we're going to have a Q&A session. And so at any point, if you have questions, just go ahead and pop them in the chat. You can do that while they're presenting and throughout. After the Q&A, we're going to do little breakout rooms, and then we're going to chat as a group, all of us together, off the record. And so with that, I'm going to tag in Peter.
Awesome. Thanks, Alia. And thanks everyone for showing up. It's good to see all your faces. And Joel, thank you, Joel, for collaborating in this event. And yeah, I forget who reached out to who first, but somehow we got together. And it's so good to finally do a session. And I'm a great admirer of your podcast, which I imagine a lot of people here are as well. So to give context to why the session came about, I wrote this article, it's a little bit spicy article, and I know there's a lot of coaches in this room right here, so I'm curious how this will go down. But the article was a critique on the coach, what I'll call the coach industrial complex. So I'll share my slides, and I'll be having about a 10-minute presentation to set up Joel's presentation. So the coach industrial complex. I think it could be described in one sentence in the entry that I wrote, is that coaches coaching aspiring coaches on how to be a coach. And I think maybe people had some experiences with this. I know there was a phase in my own practice, even though I didn't call myself a coach, there was coaching elements to it. I found myself holding space for people just wanting to be coaches. And I just felt like, what's going on here? This is rather strange. And it's represented quite nicely by this meme. Life coach client shortage expected by 2035. Start your practice before it's too late. And you can see this pyramid scheme of coach, client, coach, client, coach, client. So if this is a valid critique and this coach industrial complex is a thing, I'd say there's at least three aspects to it, if not more. It's a focus over profit, over outcomes, can cultivate bullshit personalities, especially if people are advertising their practice predominantly on social media, because social media tends to bend us and I'm using bullshit here in the Frankfurt, Harry Frankfurt sense, where you're just trying to persuade over trying to articulate the truth. And it creates self-proclaimed experts, as demonstrated by this meme. So, it's easy, though, to kind of be critical on such a thing of the coach industrial complex. And in the article, I didn't want to just make it a critique. I wanted to look at the positive aspect, the signal of what is happening with this overarching phenomenon of more coaches in the world. And I'd say the coach industrial complex is not a bad thing. And there's a lot of, I don't need to sell it to this crowd because there's a lot of coaches in this audience, but coaching is a wonderful industry and it's a wonderful practice if done well, and has benefited a lot of people. And one thing I want to hone in on, the positive aspect of more coaches in this world, is holding space, being a space holder. I find, especially maybe this is more of a male biased, but a lot of men are just terrible at holding space. And I know a lot of my friends and myself included, there's like an existential loneliness of not being seen, not being heard. There's almost like this existential violence of being kind of interpreted through a certain lens. And the art of just holding space is a beautiful thing. And I just wish more people could do it and do it well. And so I think the benefit of going through a coaching journey is gaining capacity to hold space. And of course, one of the core elements of holding space is unconditional positive regard. This is our boy, Carl Rogers. And I'll read the quote. When the other person is hurting, confused, troubled, anxious, alienated, terrified, or when he or she is doubtful of self-worth, uncertain as to identity, then understanding is called for. The gentle and sensitive companionship of empathetic stance provides illumination and healing. In such situations, deep understanding is, I believe, the most precious gift one can give another. Amen. Uh, and as an aside, if you haven't watched this conversation, this is the Gloria conversations. I think this was in like 60s or early 70s. They had three therapists: Albert Ellis from rational motive behavioral therapy, Fitz Perls from Gestalt, and then of course Carl Rogers. They engaged in their respective modalities and had an inquiry with Gloria. And if you watched it, like uh, Ellis was basically just mansplaining to Gloria, and she was really uncomfortable. Pearls was like running game and engaging like pickup artist type of techniques, and it was just really bad. And Carl Rogers was the one that was embodying unconditional positive regard. So I can see why this is, because this is embedded in the whole kind of coaching and therapeutic aspect. So if you haven't checked out these videos and want a master class on what this looks like, what holding space looks like, recommend this video. Um, and in the piece that kind of prompted this whole session, I kind of pivoted away from just the coaching terminology and put a higher level category of space holders. And I think there's this phenomena of holding space and this emergent space holders um, uh, are becoming more salient. And this is maybe a crude snapshot of the value space, but I would say there's three space holders and three corresponding values. There's the coach, which perhaps is oriented towards accomplishment, and therapist, which is to healing, and then the philosopher to wisdom. And the philosopher might be kind of an interesting addition here, because when many people think of the philosopher, they think of maybe a theoretical philosopher, an academic philosopher. But I'm using philosophy here in the Pierre Hadot sense, of philosophy as a way of life, the practical philosopher who's oriented towards wisdom. And as Hadot said, the philosopher uh, is an artist of life rather than an artist of reason, which is what he accused the academic philosophers of being. Um, and of course, I'd say a good coach is oriented towards all three of these values, and if not more. And same thing with a good therapist and a good philosopher. And perhaps these values are just like the kind of the entry values or the pain point that's corresponded to the value that kind of drives people to the practice. And at the moment, I think the coaching and then the therapist, they're more legible in the market economy at this moment, and the philosopher, or at least the practical philosopher, is not. Hopefully, that will change. Um, but like I said, the key word there is a good therapist, coach, or philosopher is oriented towards all these values. And I close the piece saying that a space holder, someone who holds space, is a prerequisite for being a friend of virtue. And virtue is moral excellence, and morality is my understanding of it is one's sense of good and bad. So cultivating this sense of good and having a friend to help you cultivate that is quite important. And this phrase, the friend of virtue, comes from Aristotle, and he had a tripartite understanding of friendships. So friendships of pleasure based on the mutual enjoyment of each other's company. So you can, hanging out with friends, getting drinks, watching the game, whatever. friendships of utility based on mutual advantages gained from the relationships, or maybe this is like the modern coworker. And then friends of virtue based on the mutual orientation toward what is good. And Aristotle argued that the friend of virtue is the most rare form of friendship, and it probably still is today, as our culture and society at large seems to support the former two. But I don't see any good institutions currently that are just focusing on friends of virtue. And again, hopefully that will change. And I think this whole coach industrial complex is perhaps leading us there, or maybe we can nudge it to lead us there. And so the conclusion I left this article, and then the one that hopefully will set up Joel's presentation, is being a space holder is a rite of passage to become a friend of virtue. So with that claim, I'll stop my slides. And then what we're going to do, Joel and I are going to have a brief exchange after our presentations before we go into the Q&A. So I'll take in Joel, see if what emerged from him.
Cool. Thanks, Peter. Yeah, I resonate a lot with what you shared there. I guess like I have a couple of questions and then a bigger one. Like, could you say, because I think for some people listening too and myself, like, what do we mean by wisdom as well? If we compare that to, healing or success or achievement.
Mm-hmm. One of the definitions I like is from Igor Grossman. He's a psychologist who studies wisdom, and he defines it as the meta value that adjudicates between all other values. So wisdom is sort of that capacity, kind of like the zoom out to see the kind of the ecology of values that are in play and what is the appropriate one to choose in any given moment. So I can go more about wisdom, and I think inquiry, especially philosophical inquiry, the way I understand it at least, is very compatible with that value.
Yeah, beautiful. I think that might speak into some of the things I might say in my presentation about that meta view of knowing what to pick up in what moment. And I also had a question about, you said friends of virtue are focusing on what is good, and I wondered if you could just say what you mean by good as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, in philosophy, they kind of distinguish ethics and morality. And the way I understand it is that ethics is like a shared standards of good and bad. And then morality is one sense of good and bad. And yeah, like what is actually good? I don't really know. There's a sense, obviously, that I have of it. But my current kind of thing is just sort of like a manifestation of like love actuated in the world. So that's what my provisional understanding of what good is.
Beautiful. Yeah, I'm curious, what do you feel is the key to this shift? That you said like space holders is a step towards liberating the proliferation of friends of virtue. I wonder for you, like what's going to enable that shift, or why are we not emphasizing friendships of virtue right now?
Mm. Um, well, perhaps virtue is not recognized as important in culture at large, and people are more focused on success or accomplishments, or they want to heal their trauma. Um, and then that kind of the spiritual North Star of virtue has been missing. And I think that is changing with the work of like John Vervaeke and kind of practical philosophy getting more popular. Uh, and but I do think like a good coach and a good therapist is oriented towards virtue, even if they don't use that term. And then maybe the entry point towards holding space uh, is different. Might come from someone's ambition space or someone wanting to heal themselves. But I think uh, the directionality is similar. And the one thing too I didn't mention is like the coach, the therapist, and then the philosopher. It's an inquiry. They're all engaging in inquiry, which is like an essential part of the whole space holding process.
Yeah, yeah. I can relate to this with clients, coaching clients coming because they want to become successful, they want to improve. And wisdom, cultivating wisdom can be a harder sell to people because it's just not, it's just not recognized or valued in the same way yet. And I'd love to ask one last question if I can, which is, how does a philosophical partner help someone cultivate wisdom? I know you're saying it's through inquiry, but what makes that different, that practice, than a coach or a therapist?
Well, and when I mentioned the coach and therapist, I'm talking about like the archetype of the coach and therapist, and based off of how it's kind of maybe popularly understood. But again, I think a good coach and therapist engages in this stuff as well, or can. And so in my space holding practice, I guess the closest thing in that's term for it is like a philosophical counselor. Um, and and the one thing that I like about philosophical counseling and then kind of holding space in the philosophical sense is not just sort of like kind of having that introspective awareness and kind of like loving your parts or kind of like doing the emotional processing. And it's not just sort of that agentic approach of like how to like accomplish something and creating a plan toward it, but it's also engaging the theoretical, looking at your models of reality, your premises, your ideologies, philosophies, and engaging with it, which is quite dangerous to do at times because it's like that could just really destabilize someone. So there's a lot of delicacy needed there. But sometimes people need to re-examine there is an ought, and a philosopher, at least one that's equipped to it, can help with that. And and that kind of like how that relates to wisdom is one of the um, in Igor, like Grossman, the guy I mentioned, in their study, I can put it in the chat. They call it, was it something metacognition? They had a term of like different aspects of wisdom. One of them was intellectual humility, and the other one was like taking multiple perspectives. And then when you can kind of go into your own like models of reality, your theoretical space, tinker around there, take on different perspectives, it helps with that kind of transperspectival approach, which allows that kind of like that metacognition that can afford different values to be in play. Yeah, so that's what I'll share there.
I think that's why I really appreciate, I've been in a session with you and really valued it, and why I think it's so needed in our times is, I know people talk about this time between worlds and what are some of the deep beliefs or structures that the worldview we're coming out of are based upon, and I think then it invites us into that level of inquiry, ontological inquiry about how our world has been ontologically designed in a way that's continually designing us, So, but I get it. Yeah, it can be destabilizing as I think we're experiencing on a collective level as well. So, yeah, I
Cool.
I see that as being one of the paths beyond coaching, actually, an important one, because coaching is an ontological structure in itself. It's a system that's been codified.
I have a sense that's nicely setting up your presentation. I'm excited to see what you have in store for us.
Yeah, cool. I'll share my screen and then see where this takes us. Let me do this. Let me see. Yeah. Okay, so hopefully I don't have as slick as a presentation as you, Peter. Like mine's, but I'm really excited to be here. And actually, I'm really excited. I'm most excited because I'm hoping there's a lot of coaches here or people passionate about coaching and what might lie beyond it, and to hear what you guys have to say, because there's it's only through sense making this is going to collectively emerge. So yeah, I want to say I'm talking playfully. Anything I say that I think is about what lies beyond coaching is, in a playful way, in a sense. I don't really know what's emerging. It's very close. It's happening right in front of us right now. But I have some thoughts, and I'd love to share them. And I do want to say, like, I love coaching as well as a modality. It's something that I've just appreciated and valued ever since I came across it. And I think one of the challenges right now is that coaching is getting codified into maybe a simplistic set of competencies which are fixed, which is reducing the deep art of what coaching is. And I'm kind of more of a rebel, So, what's the opportunity here? Do we just keep changing and evolving what coaching means, or do we find a better word? And what was fascinating to me, I was talking to David Drake a while back, and he's one of a figure in the world of coaching who's also challenging the field at the moment. And he said he met, and I'm going to forget their names now, who wrote The Inner Game of Tennis. Anyway, I've forgotten their names. It'll come to me. But basically, two of the real founders of the field of coaching, and one of them, I've forgotten their name. He actually proposed the word coaching. But what he said to David Drake, what they said was, we were never really happy with the word coach, actually. It just took off. It seemed to stick, but we didn't really like that word. It didn't seem to fit. So, yeah, and what I want to point to is coaching's been born out of a certain worldview. And many coaches I meet these days say the same thing to me, which is it feels like it's too small of a word now. What I'm really up to is like much more than that. And I don't really even talk about that publicly sometimes, is a bit taboo. So, but when I talk about here, what you can see is a slide which I'm pointing at different generations of coaching. I want to just give a real nod to someone who's had a big impact on my thinking and coaching, Steve March, who introduced me to this, and I've just added something to it. So you'll see, if you know Steve's work, you'll see his influence in some of the things I'm sharing today. But basically, you could look at these different generations of coaching which evolved. So we've got performance coaching, which is one of the first generation of coaching, solved that problem. It's focused on problem solving, winning, achieving goals. And then there emerged structural coaching, which was really about designing new ways of being. And the coach would come in and kind of assess you and offer a new vision of a way of being. And hopefully that really fits and inspires you. And then the work is to close the gap between where you are and that idealized future, that vision. And then out of that emerged presence-based coaching, this next generation of coaching, which really started to say, there's some tensions with structural coaching and performance coaching. Actually, what's really interesting is when we drop the change agenda and we start to work with what's here in the moment, by really valuing and letting things be. That what's here right now, if we could just let that be just the way it is, our experience will begin to unfold and reveal itself. And actually, that our new structure, the new ways of being, emerge out of this experience rather than us trying to get to a particular place. And that was the big insight here. And it's really about working with embodied immediacy. And so, yeah, that's a thing, to drop this change agenda, because you'll see that's baked in a lot of coaching. It's encapsulated in the self-improvement paradigm, which is all about improving the self, and actually can often perpetuate this sense of lack. And so beyond coaching, I think this is where even the word coach becomes problematic in a sense, because, like I said, a coach has a certain lineage, and we can transform that lineage, and it still influences in maybe hopefully more and more subtle ways. But what I notice when I move into practices like circling or transformational connection, where really we are just exploring in the moment, what's it like to be in connection, what's the impact of being in connection in the moment as it unfolds. That just seems to allow for just like a really pure unfoldment. And often we're deeply surprised, and we can radically enter into this moment as it unfolds, and there's an aliveness that can begin to unfold. and it actually can break the implicit power dynamic that you often find within coach and coachee. And actually, I think you enter into a kind of self-transforming relationship there where, when it's working at its best, where both parties are willing to be vulnerable and transformed in the moment. And I think, this actually will, I think it taps into what you were saying, Peter, where there will be, I see, there will be, of course, continuing official acts of coaching. That's a beautiful thing. Like, I'm coaching you as my client. I love doing that. But I see great value in these transformational connection, the way of being of coaching and other modalities kind of breaking free and proliferating around the world. And that it's really about being in friendships of virtue, to steal your language, Peter. So that's one way to look at this. And I'm just curious what people say about this. Can you see my second slide now? Yeah. Okay, so this is a little bit of a I'm on dicey territory here, because I'm kind of, I'm making a bit of a this is one of the things we see a lot, where people start to say we need to move from here to there, and I think that's problematic, but I'm doing it anyway just to make a point. So I think these are some of the elements of the worldview that are, I think, lending to the role we take as a coach evolving, and to the kinds of things we do inside of coaching and beyond coaching. So what I would say is, and this, I think, as being people, those of you who have come to the Stoa, I think, will be quite familiar with this. And I think many others too are here for the first time. So, we've been in this hyper individualist mechanical worldview, which has kind of created a split between matter and spirit. And so I think the move is from separation into a kind of interconnected wholeness. And as I've articulated, there's a move from self-improvement to unfolding. And what I would say about this move to interconnected wholeness is we might start to emphasize that actually relationships are even more primary than the parts that connect them, as people like Ian McGilchrist are pointing towards. What does that mean as the work we do for coaches, or how might that invite us beyond coaching? So I've already articulated from improvement to unfolding. Often we're caught in that game of, like, if I just work a bit harder to improve myself, I'll get there. But it's actually perpetuating this sense of lack. So what if we were to see that we were already whole and that everything we need is here? And even when I say that, like, even when I say, like, everything I need is here, I can actually feel what that does to my nervous system. Now, that's not to say that things won't unfold and deepen and enrichen, but it's just this, we're dropping this sense of there being a problem, something lacking. From knowing about to knowing from, I think we've tended to abstract ourselves out from our experience. And when I came across integral theory, I loved all the maps and the models. And then after a short amount of time, I was like, but this is, I'm getting locked into a certain mode of being, like getting off on having ever more refined maps. And it was when I came across the practice circling, and I was like, wow, we were moving into the primacy of experience and moving into almost like a Gnostic experience where knowing and being come together. And I start to know from my experience. And I think this is actually, for me, where we start to cultivate wisdom as well. So that I'm really describing there is like from a prescriptive ontology to a generative ontology, which is like, I think we've tended to, like, and I know I've done this with developmental models. It's like I learn about these developmental models, and then I start to try to force those fixed descriptions onto my living experience. But actually, what is it to have a generative ontology? What I mean by that is, not like if I just take your example of being wise, not what are the specific characteristics of being wise, but how can we be in the process of cultivating wisdom? So it's like a meta competency. And I think you spoke about success to wisdom, but I do think that's the role of a coach, potentially, even a therapist. What if we saw those as the real roles? And then I think material to numinous and energetic, that's really this. Actually, I'd say it's more about like bringing spirit and matter together again. And from atomized to contextualized is, yeah, and you can see I'm kind of repeating myself really, but we've tended to like separate our clients out from their experience. People like Dan Siegel are talking about Mui, that we're made of our relationality on a fundamental level. And what is it for us to begin to experience that? And I think that's where presence-based coaching and beyond coaching, these transformational connection practices start to go, actually. And Peter Hawkins often brings in this question. He's a coach. What does life want us to explore in our session today, rather than asking the client what they want to explore? Okay, I realize I'm not sure how long I've been going for. I'll just try and move through these last two, rather quickly. Practically, like ways of being. So, what are the guiding meta competencies or ways of being inside these modes? I think in presence-based coaching, I've named a lot of them. It's letting things be and unfold, dropping a change agenda, working with the magic of emergence, working with embodied immediacy. And beyond coaching, it's really, moving into this. I think one of the most important things is that we begin to reveal ourselves. You reveal the impact of being with another person, and I've found that to be profound in bringing in a certain sense of aliveness and fulfillment that's inherently rewarding. That you're not doing it for any other reason other than the experience of that. It's not like you're trying to get anywhere other than in deeper contact with oneself and one's experience. And I think this last concept I'd like to bring in, I think points to another way to move beyond coaching. And I think you were speaking to this, Peter, when you talked about wisdom. I think the invitation is to move beyond coaching as we currently define it, to redefine what coaching means to us. And I think it's also about knowing what role to inhabit. So this is where I was thinking of when you talked about wisdom, Peter, that, yeah, I might be playing an explicit coaching role in any one moment, because, that's when I talked about the generations of coaching, they all have their value. And sometimes pure coaching is what's needed. I've seen people in these transformational connections and, they're in this endless processing, but actually a coach steps in and really helps someone resolve something in 10 minutes. And it's incredible. So knowing what role to pick up in any moment. And I think, that's for us to begin to expand on. So, what are some of the non-Western archetypes or modes that are being, that have been on the periphery, that are wanting to come to the center as well? But, coach, healer, mentor, guide, provocateur, teacher, friend of virtue. I wanted to put some of Peter's in here. And this term mixed mystical arts is from a friend of mine, Sean Wilkinson. And it's really, I think it's a beautiful idea. It's like this vision we have of coming together, different practitioners, all with a love of the transformational moment, or with a love of being in the deepest contact with ourselves and the people and the world around us as possible. And to come together and to learn from one another, to be humble, to learn from the best practitioners, and to be willing to be transformed and put down some of the axioms, the deep beliefs we hold, and to be in, just what's the word I'm looking for? I can't think of it. But you know, just to be in this like deep commitment to the practice. And, you know, last thing, I think there's such an influence of, there's such a melting pot of influences coming in now, psychedelics, AI, you know, ecology, shamanism, systemic thinking. I mean, you could just add so many things in there that I think are disrupting the way we see what a coach is and what it means to be human. I think that's the thing. Yeah. I think we need to question, like, what was the worldview that coaching was based upon, and how does that view what being human is, you know, and what the role of a coach is. And a lot of that was born out of a kind of American Anglo worldview, and that's really up for questioning right now. So, you know, yeah, how might we re-envision what a human being is, a thriving human being is, if we started to expand that melting pot of influences? I think I'll stop there and just see now what questions you might have, Peter.
Yeah, it's great presentation, Joel. And I'll ask maybe one or two because I want to leave some room for people who have questions. So if you have any questions, maybe put it in the chat, and then I'll be able to call you, or you can just do your hand emoji, and then we'll maybe take 2 or 3 because we're going to go into a breakout room, and then we're going to do the non-recorded group inquiry portion after. But yeah, some things that came up. I like the origin of the term coach. I didn't know that, and it's like something just kind of stuck, and that people didn't really, they didn't really vibe with it totally, and that's a challenge I have. Like when I'm in my space holding practice, I don't call myself a coach. I don't even know what to call myself. Like a coach doesn't feel exactly right, but then it is also the most legible one, like the one that will attract most clients potentially, or that's what it feels like. And so with that kind of term, this actually feels quite important, like what term is used. Are you in the school that like, okay, let's run with it and transform it and see where it goes? Or do we find a different term that's more appropriate and we let that go? So I'm curious what school you belong to there.
Yeah, it's a great question. I don't have a definitive answer because we're in that question right now, you know, inside of Coaches Rising. And, you know, I get to the chance to connect with people who've helped shape the field of coaching, and, you know, David Drake being one of them, who's also in this inquiry. And you know, like just like you said, you know, people know what the word coach is, and that's great because, you know, it wasn't the case 20 years ago when you said you were a coach. People thought you coached sport teams, you know, and now people generally know more of what you mean by that. And so, yeah, and, you know, I run a company called Coaches Rising. So, so I have an affinity with the word, but yeah, like you say, it comes with its own, lineage and limitations. Uh, yeah, yeah. I I think if I just pause a moment, I can feel inside of me there is this part of me that I feel we can change that word to. I'm optimistic we can keep redefining what that word is. You know, we can keep doing that. Um, yeah, and I know other words are going to come in. I'm certain they are. They just will do.
And the last question I had is, so the kind of the whole coach industrial complex phrase was sort of a legacy of my anti-capitalist readings when I was younger. I'm no longer an anti-capitalist, but I kind of came from that, like, you know, that leftist critique on capitalism. And so you can just say like the whole critique on the coaching industry is a critique on capitalism in a way. And there's something that like I found frustrating in either going to therapists or coaches in the past. It's like, you know, you got 55 minutes and it's like structured in a certain way. And it's like, there's a lot, there's kind of like a coldness that comes from that. Um, that's why I kind of structure my practice as like I have like at least 90 minutes, but it can go longer and go shorter, and try to imbue a certain kind of a sense of leisure. Uh, and so Yeah, I'm wondering what you think of the constraints of kind of our current economy and the market economy, how you market a practice limits the potential of coaching. And the adjacent question is, what are the transferable benefits like outside of the market economy, how the skill set of coaching or therapy or space holding can like just enrich relationships more generally?
Yeah, I'm a firm believer that's possible. Like, I think, coaching as a way of being, I think that if that can break free and proliferate around the world, that could be of great benefit. And I think AI uh, may play a role there, but I'm also very cautious about AI as well. Um, and I think that, yeah, I think the way a lot of coaching is set up, well, first of all, it can lend towards like the bullshitting that you talked about. That I think coaches have to be take an honest look about the claims we make, and it's very easy to start to kind of like crank up the volume on the transformational claims I make about the work I do. So I think that's an important area and yeah, I think that's a lot of that going on. And I think also that a lot of the way coaching is structured is actually more suited towards the coach than the client. So yeah, that 50 minutes model that came from therapy that allows them the last 10 minutes for a kind of note making and transition. Yeah. Uh, well, I I think it's interesting to start to break that, traditional kind of coaching, which is like meeting once every 2 weeks for an hour, once every 3 weeks, to break that apart actually and see what really supports the client to move towards what they most desire. Because I think that's another place where coaches need to get really honest about, yeah, how could we improve that ecosystem? Uh, yeah, yeah. I really appreciated the way you hosted your session with that breathing space to, just to really allow the exploration to unfold.
Cool. So I have many more questions, but I'll pause there and take Ollie back and see if there's any questions from the room, and maybe we jump in breakout room in like 11, about 15 minutes.
Sounds good. So you do have a question from earlier, but I don't think we should count this. This is a really quick one. What's the name of the lecture that you shared earlier with Carl Rogers and Albert Ellis?
Oh, it's Gloria. I'll put it in the chat. It's like
Okay,
conversation with Gloria or something.
perfect. All right. So our first question is from Tim. Tim, do you want to unmute yourself and share your question?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Peter and Joel. This has been great. My question is, I'd be curious for you two or even anyone in the room to elaborate on specifically that move from material to numinous and energetic, and that in my own development, that has been a key part of my unfolding, but I still am not quite clear on how to effectively hold space for others in that.
You want to take a go at that, Peter? I'm happy to. I
Since
think you've got some things to say about that as well.
yeah, I can go second to collect my thoughts on it, but
Yeah. It's a great question. I think especially as AI starts to copy the methods and steps of coaching, that this will be one of the biggest kind of differentiators. Uh, so for me, what's helped is to have an understanding of depth. So I'll refer again here to Steve March's 4 depths, of parts, process, presence, and non-duality. And each one of those has an ontological experience of it, and you can start to kind of tune in to what depth might be showing up in your client. And so Yeah, you know, I think that presence-based coaching kind of level that I talked about, it really is about what you're talking about. So the more I can like hold space, you know, and have an attitude of welcoming whatever arises, like cultivating my attunement to the present moment. And if I've done my like inner work, you know, actually inner and outer work, or that's a false dichotomy. But if I've refined my capacity, my embodiment, then I can start to attune on more and more subtle levels to what's showing up in the moment, you know, qualities of presence, or, you know, there's an intuitive capacity that comes online, which can seem like magic when other coaches do it, but it's, you know, there's part pattern recognition, it's part kind of attunement as well. I could say a lot about this. I think it's a really brilliant question. I'll stop there because of time, and yeah, see where Peter takes us.
Yeah, I have a kind of like almost maybe like a warning of it, because you know, and so this is metaphysics, like in the philosophical sense, and then kind of the like the four branches of philosophy. There's like logic, there's ethics, which is, you know, good and bad, and then there's epistemology, knowledge, and then metaphysics, what's real. And then ever since Descartes and the Enlightenment, there was like what they called an epistemic turn, a focus on knowledge, on truth claims, and it's like very kind of heady, disembodied, if you will. They call it Descartes' wound, some people. Uh, and now we're kind of entering an age where it's like metaphysics is making a comeback, and there's like a multitude of different living philosophies in the wild that have different, not only different epistemics, but different metaphysics. Um, and there's something called ontological shock, is that when you change your metaphysics too quickly, it's too shocking, and it could, like, you know, lead to something quite dangerous. Uh, and so this is why I like the, you know, the psychedelic community. They're building all these like ethical protocols to like kind of onboard people to different kind of metaphysical states. And then there's, you know, you turn the state into a trait eventually. And I think Steve March's, like, you know, the parts work to non-duality pipeline is quite nice, how it weaves between those different kind of ontologies. So I think we're in the Wild West of figuring out how to go about this, but it's here, and it's something that we have to collectively address.
All right. We also have a question from Jeff. Jeff, do you want to unmute yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm kind of curious what's behind the need to come up with something that's beyond coaching. And I'll say because I have been a coach for well over 10 years in the agile development field. And one of the things where I felt things in my profession went off the rails is when we professionalized and objectified the profession, right? And we stopped being of service to people. And then the focus became creating more of us by selling that object. And so I'm really, you know, just curious why we need to come up with something different. You know, this being of service to others as human beings and helping them along their path has been called teaching and mentoring, and in other traditions it's been calling a guru or things like that. And I'm just, the reason, and you know, you probably hear the skepticism coming out of me, and I really feel that one of the things that professional coaching, I think, is really starting to hold the world back. All right. And it's because of this need to objectify who I am so that I can sell it and create more of me. Right. Instead of just being of service to people. So that's, sorry, I'll stop talking and ask my question, which is what's underneath the need to have something beyond?
You want me to dive in, Peter?
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, great. I love your reflections. I think in a way, like, well, there is no need for one. I think in part, my inquiries are born out of the same frustrations you might feel, actually, Jeff, which is when something like coaching becomes professionalized and institutionalized, it starts to become commodified and kind of reduced, and limited to a certain set of competencies, and then the kind of eros falls out of it, the service, the deep service falls out of it. So in a way, I'm kind of like with you in your kind of skepticism. So for me, it's not about branding the next thing in order to sell that as the next shiny thing you need to buy because this old thing is rubbish. I think in a way what you're saying is just so spot on. It's like it's about being of service. We've done that for millennia in different forms.
And I'll just share like the Beyond Coaching kind of a title was just sort of a last minute thing that we were just like, what should we call this thing? It's called Beyond Coaching. We got alternative titles. So I'm by no means attached to that kind of phrasing because it does kind of lead to certain connotations. But for me, like my like kind of ambition is pretty naked here. I want to like Trojan horse virtue ethics into kind of this at least a certain segment of coaching, because I feel the potential. I just when I sense into like the coaching movement, I just feel like so much aliveness, so much energy, so much evolution towards something. So yeah, that mine I just want to Trojan horse virtue into whatever that is.
Good. Thank you.
I think that's all for questions.
Maybe Marie-Louise, did you have your hand up?
Oh.
I don't know. I saw you
Yes,
wait.
sorry. Yeah, I was just, it's actually more a comment rather than a question. And it's kind of going to Jeff. I'm a person who worked in business for 40 years and found that I had to step out because I found that business wasn't serving most people, corporate life. Lots of people. And my first thing when I stepped out, having been in technology all my life, I did a coaching course and came to coaching to try and serve people, to try and fight. Like my business I've set up is about being human in the digital world. And I thought coaching would be the ideal thing to try and help me reach people and serve people to reposition themselves in a world that is drastically changing. And while I'm loving looking people in the eyes, having worked in technology most of my life, it's curious. I'm finding in lots of ways I'm not following the rules of coaching because I'm needing to connect deeper with people. So it's about this educating people of the ability to connect, because we've gone through generations where it's about the ego and the person and the individualization, whereas now we need to come back to community and grow together and collaborate and connect. And what is emerging is coming through connection. It's not coming, well, some of it's coming through ego. And it's funny because I'm finding the embodied coaching is much more close to where we need to be. Yet a lot of the coaching courses aren't teaching embodiment now. So just as Jeff was speaking there, I was just there going, yeah, I know. And I came to coaching to think it was a solution. And it's only part of the solution, because it is about connecting and reteaching people how to value, like you're saying, the friendship of virtue. Sorry, that's my comment to have.
Thank you, Marie-Louise.
All right. Yeah, as Alia said, I'm going to jump into breakout room. So thank you for hosting the session and Q&A, Alia. I'm going to take it over from here with putting people in breakout rooms. So if you have to slip out now, feel free to do so. But we're going to do a brief breakout room for 5 minutes. And when we're back, we're going to have a group inquiry, non-recorded, so that won't be posted on YouTube. And so yeah, feel free to slip out if you feel called. And in the breakout room, simply what stood out most for you from what has been presented or shared thus far. Then just have an exchange with your partner. It'll be 2 people per room. So I'll arrange that now.